Hello, I am Brigantia Blackbird, and welcome to the second class of Wicca 101. This week we are going to delve into the Witch's Pyramid. Now, before you get too excited, I have to tell you this is not a literal building. More's the pity. However, the Witch's Pyramid is an effective metaphor that describes what it means to being a witch. What does this entail? How does it involve? And also, perhaps most importantly, how this idea can guide and organize an individual's studies. This is a concept that is relevant to all forms of witchcraft, not just Wicca. So to begin with on our pyramid, we have the foundation, and this represents knowledge. So before we can ask ourselves what knowledge needs to be accumulated, we have to ask where can that knowledge about witchcraft be acquired? Well, for starters, classes like this video class. Occasionally, I think in some areas there are in-person classes you can attend as well. They probably cost money. However, there are classes available, and there are other people who have done internet classes on Wicca, and this happens in a variety of formats, sometimes through text, sometimes through streaming and interactive sessions. There's a lot of different ways to get this done. A second way to gather knowledge is, of course, through books, and there are a wide variety of books available about Wicca. There's a lot of books about paganism, both ancient and modern, and various forms of witchcraft, and books about mythology and practical magic, and you can find these in public libraries. So don't be bashful. If you can get a hold of a library card and get yourself to the public library, you can probably find some kind of book about Wicca. You can go to the bookstore. You can go to online companies like Amazon or anywhere you can buy a book online. You can get hard copies. You can get things in digital formats on your Kindle. You have options, and you can get access to books if you choose to do so. And one note about Kindle is that there are quite a few books about Wicca and witchcraft and paganism that are available on Kindle for free. Keep that in mind. A third way to gather knowledge is through a process of mentoring, whether this is a formal or informal thing. And of course, there's a lot of mentoring going on where you have in-person classes and you can speak with teachers one-on-one. And sometimes there are people who they just come into contact with people in the pagan community and they find someone who's willing to take them on as a student. And that can be a very successful approach. That used to be one of the few approaches you could take. But even if we don't have a face-to-face mentor that we have an ongoing one-on-one conversation with, if we just go to community, whether it's in person or it's online, and you engage other practitioners in conversation. That can be instructive in and of itself, even if it's not a formal learning environment. Simply asking them, not just, okay, what do you believe? What is your practice like? Ask them why. Tell them that you want to understand their thought process and how they came to find their path as opposed to another. It will be instructive. Even if you don't end up going the same way as they do, if you understand the thinking process behind what someone has done, that can in turn inform your own journey. Another place we can get knowledge is from nature itself. Now, when I'm talking about learning from nature, I'm talking about actively paying attention to it and also taking into account learning about the more mundane aspects of nature. So this is more than just a passive admiration for natural beauties. This means actually going out of our way to accumulate some facts and understanding the body of knowledge that humankind has been able to build up thus far. You can keep a notebook about, the goings-ons of your local environment. Look for patterns and record how interacting with your environment makes you feel emotionally, what kind of energy you can detect, and just what you think this means on a more spiritual level. Start connecting those dots. Now, another thing you can do is that in a lot of places in the United States, a lot of the states themselves, they have a website for their Department of Conservation. If you check in every few weeks or once a month, they usually have a tab that'll show you, what's active right now as far as the animals go, what plants are taking center stage. And that's another way to get more in tune with where you're living right now. So now we know where we can start looking for knowledge. Now we have the issue of storing it. I maintain that a short pencil and a pad of paper is going to be better than a long memory. It is good to have notes to refer to. And it's probably wise to keep all of your notes, your observations, your questions in a dedicated notebook or journal, or have a dedicated computer file. This is prudent and it allows you to refer to the information as you need to or want to. And if you have a physical copy of your notebook, I would really keep just your magical studies in that. That way you know where it is and it's not cluttered up with extraneous stuff. Now, doing this means that you have a means to go back and study key points. Remember the main ideas, and this will help with the learning process. You'll remember so much if you hear it, you'll remember more if you write it down, and then you'll remember still more if you start thinking about it and discussing the idea with others. And periodically, it's not a bad idea to just take an inventory about the state of your knowledge. Ask yourself some pretty basic questions, such as, what are the primary principles that you can list about Wicca? What basic practices can you name that are common in Wicca? What are the usual celebrations in Wicca? And if you don't have satisfactory answers for questions that are on this basic level, then for your own sake, I urge you to go back and start building a stronger foundation. So you'll find with the Witch's Pyramid, there are usually tools of some kind associated with every aspect and dimension of the pyramid, and for the base, the tool that's associated with it is the Book of Shadows or a grimoire. So once someone makes the decision that they're going to practice Wicca or another form of witchcraft, it's customary and strongly recommended to create your own personal Book of Shadows and or a grimoire. Now, a Book of Shadows is where you write down your declared beliefs and principles, both magical and spiritual, your ritual forms, spells, relevant mythology, Sabbat and Esbat traditions, meditations, pathworking, dreams, correspondences, journaling of the results of your workings, and it's the sum of your spiritual and magical knowledge. It's all kept in the Book of Shadows. I also suggest having kind of a bare bones grimoire that functions more so as a manual of your general practice, and keeping rituals and spells that you use quite often, and keeping it handy on your altar. In fact, this is my, well, not quite pocket size, but this is certainly my traveling size. This is my grimoire. This is the stuff where I keep everything that I use on a daily, if not weekly or monthly basis. It's stuff I refer to all the time, and that will always remain relevant, and it's small enough to stick in my purse so I can have it with me wherever I go. Food for thought. Another thing that some people like to keep is called a book of mirrors, and that's more so a diary where it's talking about how they're feeling about their spiritual journey. And then another thing that people sometimes like to keep is a separate dream journal. For obvious reasons, we can get a lot of messages in dreams, and it's handy to have all that stuff just in one place. Now, Book of Shadows can get very large and very out of control very quickly, so it's not uncommon in this modern age for people to have more than one volume for their personal Book of Shadows, and there's a variety of ways to organize it. You could have a volume that's, the Book of the Living, where you have daily and seasonal practices, daily rituals, spells, things like that. Another volume could be the Book of the Dead, where you have lore about Summerland, reincarnation, lingering spirits, how to deal with them, funeral rites. And then you might have a third Book of the Spirit, where you have information about the god and the goddess, pantheons that you work with, mythology, special worship rituals to deal with those gods, things of that nature. Another approach would be to have one volume for everyday witchcraft, another for the Sabbats, another for the Esbats, another for rites of passage. These would be Wiccanings, coming-of-age rituals, initiations and dedications, hand fastings, hand partings, croning, saging rituals, funerals, things like that. You could have another volume just for your spells, another for astrology and dream symbols, animal guides, magical plants, crystals, divination, deity. You can have as many volumes or as few as what you like. It's really going to depend on what you think is practical and what you're willing to invest in to create for yourself. If you do decide to one day create your own Book of Shadows, I strongly suggest keeping a 3-ring binder at first. Have dividers that you can easily label, and that way you can arrange it and rearrange it any way you like, switch the pages back and forth is what's necessary. Creating a Book of Shadows, it's It really is kind of a never-ending task. There's always going to be additions. There'll be things that fall away. You'll have different versions as you go through your journey if you choose to go on this path. So don't worry about perfection too much. Worry about, is it serving the purpose you need it to serve? So that does it for our foundation. That brings us to our first wall, which is on the east. This correlates with imagination and the element of air. The first step of creation, which is what we are doing in magic, is to have the capacity to envision something new or different from the way things currently are. It's been said that necessity is the mother of invention. If one thing doesn't work, then steps need to be taken to either fix it or to replace it with something that's better. Curiosity is something that also drives creation. Even in a scientific realm, of how many discoveries begin with someone asking the question, I wonder what would happen if? And finding out the question to that if is what propels knowledge forward and the ability to apply that knowledge. So as a practitioner, one of the questions you'll keep coming back to is, what do I want? And when we define what we want, the next step is to really visualize that want. And visualization is a skill that requires constant practice. So one exercise you could try for visualization is to pick a particular place that you like, whether this is a real place, an imaginary place, something that you know from fiction. Close your eyes and picture the general setting. Then focus in on the details and be precise as your imagination allows. Can you visualize the textures of any objects in this scene? If there's a railing on a staircase, is that railing smooth or rough? If there's water somewhere, can you feel the cold or the dampness of the water? If there's a cute, cuddly, furry animal, is its coat soft or coarse? Are there sounds in your landscape? Can you hear the chirping of birds? Or are there vehicles present? What do they sound like? If you have a natural feature, a waterfall or something of that kind, can you hear that dull roar? Or if you're next to a canyon, can you hear the echo? Is there anything in there that tastes? If there's salt on the air, if you see yourself on the beach, can you taste that salt? If there's food cooking somewhere in this scene, what flavors are you detecting? And after you are done visualizing it, and you've got it as clear in your head as what you possibly can, analyze your feelings and your reactions to it. Were you excited or were you calm? Were you happy or were you disappointed? Were you safe or scared? Journal about this and keep up the practice. Practice is going to be the most important thing. The more you practice this, the better you get at it. And then once you come to the point where you are doing actual spell work, it's going to be so much easier to visualize the intent and then release it out into the world because your brain has been trained. So the element of air symbolizes the energy of the mind. So think about the intellect, what you are consciously taking in and processing. Imagination, what you can envision and create. And then intuition, what your unconscious mind is giving you nudges about. These are all tied in with the element of air and how your mind functions. Then the tool for this particular side of the pyramid is the athame. Now the athame is a dull, double-edged ritual knife. Most often has a black handle. My personal athame has a silver handle. Let's see, here it is. Looks like about like that. Now the purpose of the athame is to cut through non-physical energies, as well as to command and to direct non-physical energies. The athame is associated with the element of air because it can symbolically cut through illusions, both in the external world and the illusions we impose upon ourselves. Ideally, the athame is kept in a sheath and it's placed on the east side of the altar. Now for our south wall, the will and the element of fire. First, we have to examine what is the will. In a magical and spiritual context, your will means your true will. So this isn't just some random whim that's drifting through your brain. This relates to the purpose of your spiritual pursuits as well as the overarching purpose of your entire life. So, big deal. Capital W, will. Carrying out your will is going to require daring and courage. The job of self-transformation, that is part of the great work, and that's part of a Wiccan's magical and spiritual path. And that means there will be change will be an ever-present part of life as you continue to refine your character and your capabilities. Change can be scary because genuine change propels us into the realms of the unknown. So to enable this transformative process, and thereby this brings our conscious selves into better alignment with our true will, it's going to be necessary to do what is called shadow work. Shadow work is a process in which we examine that which we keep hidden from our conscious sight. We are peering into our own souls. First, do not be alarmed by the name shadow. What lurks in the shadows of our soul isn't necessarily bad or traumatic. There are good things and inspiring things there as well. We just aren't necessarily looking at things for what they truly are or learning how to truly direct those energies in an effective way. Now, the primary goal of shadow work is to improve your internal balance. This will require coming to terms with many things. Some of those things will be difficult, others will be surprisingly easy. But this process is an act of seizing power and asserting self-ownership. It's practicing sovereignty over yourself. Now, the next thing to keep in mind about magic is that all magic is the pursuit of change. To create change is to essentially assert that you know what's best in the situation. That's a very powerful declaration, and it can be morally complicated at times. That's why it's so vital that we don't presume to dictate things that properly lie within the power of other people. We would want our personal choices and decisions respected, and in order to claim that protection for ourselves, we have to extend that for others as well. Something to keep in mind. Now, it does also require considerable energy and passion to make magic and the subsequent changes fully manifest. Now, when I was preparing this video, I came across a quote from Goethe. And Goethe stated, "The moment one definitely commits, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur that help one that would never have otherwise have occurred. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." So, commitment. We could do well to ask ourselves if we truly understand what it means to be committed to a course of action. And we should examine our lives, look for the patterns in our lives when we've made commitments of one sort or another. Did we actually follow through with them? What were the results if we did or did not? What did we learn about what it means to have what it takes in order to complete a project or see something through? Will is the second step in creation. So to work out our will, that's going to require that you eliminate obstacles in your path, you get fired up so you have the energy to follow through, and also to have the energy to stand steady if you feel your nerves starting to get the better of you. This, of course, relates to the element of fire, and it symbolizes drive, passion, and motive energy. Fire is fuel, literally and figuratively, and harnessing this element is what enables us to get things done on both the magical and the mundane levels. Fire is transformation and purification. Now, the tool for all of this is the wand, which the wand is... Things falling, it's okay. But here's the wand. Now, wands are used to both attract and repel unseen energies, and this includes calling and dismissing the quarters during rituals. And wands are associated with the element of fire for two reasons. Traditionally, wands are made of wood, and wood burns, therefore. And now, occasionally, some wands like this are made of stone and crystal. And this particular one is made of selenite, which of course relates to the element of fire. And thus far, the other crystal wands that I've seen, they are all composed of materials that also correspond with the element of fire. So it all fits together neatly. Now, the force with which wands are used to attract or repel energy will have a great deal of influence over how effective a tool that they are. So you are going to have to put some muscle into this. And traditionally, the wands are placed on the south side of the altar. Now, for the western wall, silence, the element of water. Silence is the third step of creation, and it serves several magical and spiritual purposes. Silence is the art of discretion. Now, this doesn't mean we can never talk about our magical practices. If that was wrong, then I couldn't make videos like this, and no one would ever have been able to, in good conscience, teach anyone anything. And we couldn't gather together in groups because that wouldn't be very silent. So we shouldn't take this to mean that silence must be maintained at all times. Nonsense. We need to be able to confer with our fellow practitioners. And I would say it's one thing to consult our other practitioners, particularly about our spell work. But it's quite a different thing to go around bragging about how powerful and wonderful one's magic really is. When we're consulting with other practitioners, it's going to be an educational process. It'll let us know if we're on the right track, or if they're noticing difficulties we can't foresee, or consequences that we might not have taken into account at the time. We learn, and they can help us do that. However, when the people who are going around announcing their magical deeds from the highest hill so everyone will know what they're up to and presumably admire them, let's just be very frank and call this what this is. It is vanity. This is about people who are wanting to gain admiration, and yeah, it's just not a good look. Another thing about silence about after we've performed a magical working is that if our magic is still cooking, and which it's not fully manifest yet, if we talk about it and worry about it and fret about it and tell everyone, that can dissipate the energy and sometimes can actively work against it. You do not want to send mixed signals to the universe. And another thing about silence is that it is halfway to listening and having a greater awareness of the energy of our surroundings and the people within them. And silence can really be a valuable teacher. You might try this in meditation sometime. If you're ready to progress beyond guided meditations, just take a moment, find a spot to sit outside if you possibly can, and just soak it all in. Try not to think. If you have random thoughts, just let them drift by. Don't engage with them. And just listen. You might be surprised. We can also cultivate an inner silence also through meditation, and we might also want this inner silence when we're at ritual or when we're performing spells. It really is an invaluable skill, because if we can be quiet within our own minds, that means that our intentions will be clearer and sharper. It also means that because we don't have a lot of thoughts cluttering up our brains at these times, we're going to be more able to listen. That means that we can hear the voices of our guides, our ancestors, our gods. And if you have any particular experiences with this, it's worth writing those down in your book of shadows. You never know just how far-reaching some of that information or those lessons might be. So the element of water is associated with this side of the pyramid, and it symbolizes emotion, cleansing, and intuition. Water cleans ourselves, our tools, and our ritual spaces. Emotion is also a kind of fuel for our work. It's just not as aggressive as a fuel as fire is. Water also relates to intuition as well as a variety of psychic abilities. And it works rather like the ebb and flow of natural bodies of water. We'll see this particularly in the oceans. And it correlates with the ebb and flow of the energy, including psychic energy. It's just the tides. It goes in, it comes out, and back and forth. That's how it functions. And if you are able to maintain a kind of quiet within your mind, that's when you're going to be able to start feeling those tides. Now, the tool for this is the chalice or the cup, which is the blue one back there. The chalice can hold water, wine, or any other beverage used during ritual. Now, the shape of the chalice, as well as its function, corresponds with the womb, which is the source of creation. But it also relates to the tomb, where creation goes to rest after its physical form expires. And then from that tomb, it'll go back to the womb and reform and burst forth into life once more. Now, ideally, the chalice is going to be placed on the west side of the altar. Now we have our north wall. This relates to faith and the element of earth. Time for a tea break. Okay. Faith is the fourth step of creation, and I think it's the most difficult of the four walls, because faith cannot be forced, or faked, or simply willed into being. It's going to develop naturally, or it will not. However, once we begin to feel the natural stirrings of faith, we can then build upon that and strengthen it through accumulating knowledge and gaining magical experience. Now, we have to make sure we're not confusing faith with self-deception. And one difference, which can help us gauge what we're actually experiencing, is that self-deception tends to come with an uneasy conscience because we know we're trying to lie to ourselves, and you can never fully get away with that. Or we have a sense that something isn't right. We're trying to something in our minds. We're trying to make it real, but reality is contradicting us. And newsflash, reality always wins. So something to keep in mind. However, faith, by contrast, it's led by intuition. It's knowing that there are puzzle pieces coming together, even if you don't have immediate proof of how that is happening or why. You're just seeing, you're detecting the natural order and flow of things. So we can ask ourselves, what does faith mean to us? What, if anything, do we have faith in for real at this moment? And for anyone taking this class, a very serious question is, do you want to grow in faith? Because without having this faith, you're not going to be able to push your magic through and actually get something done. So it is a pretty major question to consider. So the element of earth is associated with this side, and it symbolizes fully manifested energy, the material world, the practicalities of life. It's within the literal earth, the soil, that life begins. What grows from that soil feeds other forms of life. And I just had an advertisement pop up. That's different. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. Yes, the soil. Life grows from that soil. What grows from it, that feeds other life forms, and those life forms in turn go on to feed others. And when life is fully at its end, the components of that life return to the earth again. It's all absorbed, and then that's used to grow new plants to begin the cycle of life all over again. It's constant recycling. This is the reason why the cycle of the element of earth and the physical earth can be properly described as both the tomb and the womb, because it is serving both functions. The element of earth is a building block. It has physical substance, and it's used to create many things in many different forms. Now, the element of earth, perhaps more than the other elements, most closely corresponds with the nitty-gritty of human life, and also the need to produce things in order to sustain that life. Now, the tool for that is the pentacle. Mine's out of reach, but that's okay. You know what a pentacle looks like. At least I hope you do. For those who don't, the pentacle is a 5-pointed star that is within a circle. It is a magical shield, and it's often made from carved wood, metal, or fired clay. Sometimes other symbols will be incorporated into the pentacle or carved on the outside edges. It's used in ritual as a symbol of the element of earth, for protection from unfriendly energies, or as more practically, as an offering plate to serve the cakes during the cakes and ale segment of ritual. Obviously, the pentacle would have to be of sufficient size to be used in this latter fashion. It represents the totality of the physical world, rocks, plants, animals, everything that's material and solid, as well as the concepts of health, abundance, and strength. And ideally, the pentacle would be placed on the north side of the altar. So we have our foundation, we have our sides of the pyramids, and now we're at that top chunk, the spirit. Spirit can refer to your own personal spirit, but it also is what connects you to deity, as well as departed ancestors and different spiritual guides of different sorts. This pinnacle is at the point at which the foundation and the elemental walls all come together and they to fully release in this last stage of creation, manifestation. It's all coming together at this point where all the energy is directed. And this peak is what transforms a practitioner from being a student into becoming a fully fledged witch who is also a co-creator of the world. Now, there is no particular tool that directly corresponds to the top of the pyramid, because in a way, we are that tool. It is our very being in all this of our layers and levels of complexities. We are the last ingredient in the act of creation, and we are the final push of energy that can make something happen. It's pretty cool. So what is inside our witch's pyramid? The interior is supposed to be love. Now, why would this be? Think about it, we've been looking at, all these different exterior elements, and they've all served very specific purposes, and now we've come to the inside and we're talking about love. Consider this. One of the traditional ways to end a spell is with the phrase, with harm towards none and for the greatest good of all. That expression is an acknowledgement of love and benevolence towards one's fellow creatures. This love is what gives the rest of the pyramid its shape and supports its structure and keeps our own motivations in check. And this is where we're really starting to see why that love is so important. We can't have just an empty pyramid. And if we had a pyramid that was built on and shaped by resentment or anger or just a desire for power, that's going to be weak from the get-go, and no amount of maintenance is going to keep it standing for very long. It's an act of self-destruction to eschew the need for love within witchcraft. Love also has no particular tool to represent its presence, and that's because it should permeate everything we are touching and doing. It should really be the focus of what we're trying to do. We're supposed to be creators rather than destroyers. It should be the undercurrent of energy that is within our very being, and then it's also infused into our tools and to our intentions and our spells and rituals. So there we have it. Taking a chunk at a time, you too can build up your own personal witch's pyramid. Wicca 101 is laying part of that foundation. In Wicca 202, that will help you build your walls. And Wicca 303 will aid in putting the cap on top. The entire process will hopefully infuse the interior of your pyramid with love, which will be love for yourself, love for other people, love for the beauty of the craft, a love for the gods who bestowed upon us the capacity to wield these powerful creative forces. But that part is up to you. I can't teach you how to love. That's something that has to spring from you. So, homework time now. This will be the assignment from September 11th to September 17th. First question, foundation. What methods of research, gathering information are most effective for you? Whether it be classes, videos, books, or piecemeal research, just think about yourself. What in the past has really helped you learn? And then the second question for the foundation is, please list 5 main categories of knowledge that you think will be relevant in studying Wicca. I think it'll be interesting to see what those answers are if you choose to share them. So the second question, East Wall, Element of Air, the intellect. The question is, what role do you believe the mind plays in Wiccan theology and practice? Question 3, South Wall, Element of Fire, the will. As objectively as you can, please consider how much willpower you have when you encounter a challenge. How often do you find yourself overcoming obstacles? In what way or ways do you think you can strengthen your willpower? Question 4, West Wall, Element of Water, silence. Are you comfortable or uncomfortable with silence? In the age of social media, do you find it difficult or easy to keep personal information to yourself? Well, we're thinking about question 5, the North Wall, Element of Earth, faith. Please describe what you think and how you feel about the concept of faith. Do you think that faith plays a similar or a different role in Wicca than it does in other religions? Question 6, the top spirit divine connections. In next week's class, we will discuss the primary deities of Wicca, the god and the goddess. What do you think about the idea of divinity being equally balanced between a masculine god and a feminine goddess? Question 7, the interior, love, motivations. Every form of real witchcraft involves wielding power, and that makes practicing Wicca or other traditions of witchcraft a responsibility. In view of that, how important or unimportant do you think it is for a practitioner to be motivated from a place of benevolence and love? And last, question 8. Do you think the idea of the witch's pyramid will be helpful or unhelpful to you in your studies? So, that is your mission, should you choose to accept it. After I post this video, I will also make sure I take a copy of the assignment and I post that in the study hall at the Discord group, Blackbird's Brew. Again, no one ever has any obligation, obviously, to do the homework. It's not going to be collected. It's not for my benefit. You do not have to share your answers, but if you would like to, I think that would be fantastic, and it would be a good way to further discussions. Now, our next workshop chat is going to be taking place Sunday, September 12th at 3 p.m. Central Time, Missouri Time, in the workshop channel at Blackbird's Brew. I hope you'll be able to make it there. Obviously, I don't expect anyone to have completed their homework or anything of that kind, but it will be a good opportunity for us to briefly go over the content of this video for people to add their impressions, ask any questions, examine and pick apart these ideas. I think that'd be a pretty useful thing to do, and I hope you will join us there. And I think that is just about it. Again, next week we're going to examine the question of who is the god and who is the goddess in Wicca. So I'll see you in another video.